HOA Karen demanded my mom remove her ramp. She didn't know Mom built the HOA. My name is Jonah Bright. I'm a high school history teacher, not a fighter. I've lived in a lot of quiet places, but nothing ever prepared me for a war over a damn wheelchair ramp. My mother, Margaret Bright, is 76. She survived breast cancer, a widowhood she never asked for, and 3 decades of community service that shaped this town. The ramp outside her house isn't just a few planks of wood and nails. It's a symbol of everything she's overcome. It's what lets her walk out the front door with a little dignity after 2 knee replacements. And what lets my daughter, Lily, who uses a walker, come over without feeling like she's a burden. So when a woman named Karen Thistlewood, newly elected president of a so-called revived HOA, slapped a notice on my mom's door that said her accessibility ramp violated neighborhood uniformity standards and had to be removed within 10 days, I knew something was deeply wrong. But I didn't know yet how far Karen was willing to go, or who my mother really used to be. It all started on a Wednesday. I just dropped Lily off at school and was driving through Brookhaven Estates, sipping gas station coffee that tasted like burnt toast, when I saw Mom standing on her porch, her mouth slightly open, holding a bright orange notice and shaking hands. "Jonah," she said when I pulled into her driveway, "they're trying to make me take down the ramp." I got out of the car fast, took the paper from her, and read Notice of Violation Structure Modification without prior approval. Under Section 7.2 of the Brookhaven Homeowners Association Covenant, unapproved additions such as ramps, awnings, or fences must be removed within 10 business days or face fines of $100 per day. There was a seal at the top, not the official city crest, but a copycat logo I didn't recognize. And at the bottom, a signature that made my stomach twist. Karen Thistlewood, President, Brookhaven HOA. "Since when do we have an HOA again?" I asked. Mom shook her head. "That association dissolved in 2005. I know because I founded the damn thing back in '89, and I helped shut it down when it turned into a tool for bullies and bigots." I stared at her. "You founded the HOA." She nodded slowly, before it got corrupted. The next day, I tried to get answers. I showed up at the so-called HOA office, which turned out to be a converted garden shed at the edge of the neighborhood park. Inside, Karen sat behind a plastic table stacked with printed pamphlets, a laptop, and a coffee mug that said Queen Bee. She didn't look up when I entered. "If you're here about the ramp, the deadline stands. I'm here because you delivered a threat to my elderly mother." I said, "Who needs that ramp to walk?" Karen looked up. Thin lips, sharp bob, too much perfume. She gave a tight, performative smile. "We have to think of the property values. Mr. Bright, she built this neighborhood." I said, "Well," she replied, clearly not listening. "This is a new era. We've revived the HOA with new leadership and are enforcing the covenants to restore aesthetic cohesion." "Aesthetic cohesion," I echoed. "It's a ramp, not a spaceship." She didn't flinch. "If you have accessibility concerns, you can file for an exemption. It may take 6 to 8 weeks. So in the meantime, as my mom's just supposed to sit inside." Karen folded her hands. "Non-compliance will result in escalation." There was something in her eyes, not order, not concern, control. She liked the idea of breaking people under the illusion of authority. That's when I knew this wasn't about a ramp. This was about power. Mom didn't want to make a scene. She never did. She said, "Let's wait and see what happens." But the next day, Karen upped the stakes. Without warning, a private towing company arrived and tried to haul away my mom's sedan, claiming it was improperly parked due to ramp obstruction. They didn't succeed. I showed up in time to stop it, but they left behind another citation and a flyer advertising complaint resolution services that just happened to have Karen's name on it. By Friday, 4 more residents received violation notices. All elderly, all living alone. All with minor structures Karen called unsightly: a small greenhouse, a bird feeder stand, a patio cover, and then someone slashed the caution yellow tape along my mom's ramp. No name, No cameras, just a quiet act of intimidation. That night, while I was reattaching new safety tape under porch light and moonlight, Mom finally said something that made me stop cold. "Jonah," she murmured, "I think she's trying to erase me." The neighborhood, once friendly, had grown quiet. People whispered but didn't speak up. Karen had printed newsletters, held meetings no one attended, and started parading around with a clipboard, writing down violations like she was preparing a report for a dictator. And then came the final straw. On Sunday morning, my daughter Lily came to visit. When she reached the top of the ramp with her walker, the entire railing collapsed under her hands. One of the support bolts had been unscrewed. She tumbled sideways and hit the steps hard. Thank God she only ended up with bruises and a sprained wrist. But Mom screamed like she just watched lightning strike. I ran to them both. As I scooped Lily into my arms, I saw Karen standing across the street, watching, smiling. That was the moment my grief turned into something else entirely. Not fear, fury. I didn't sleep that night. Not just because Lily's wrist was wrapped in gauze and she whimpered in her sleep. Not because my mother sat at the kitchen table for hours staring at the ramp plans she'd kept in a manila folder since 2011, but because I had made a decision. No more warnings, no more waiting, no more asking nicely. Karen Thistlewood wanted a war. She'd just kicked the wrong hornet's nest. At dawn, I went digging. I took a personal day from school, brewed a thermos of coffee, and drove to the county clerk's office. My first question was simple. Is there any record of an official HOA reformation for Brookhaven Estates? The clerk, a young guy named Evan who looked like he barely remembered the early 2000s, typed for 10 minutes and shook his head. "There's nothing recent," he said. "In fact, the HOA you mentioned was legally dissolved in 2005. We processed the paperwork after a public vote." I blinked. "So the group calling itself the HOA now," he turned the screen toward me, "doesn't legally exist." That was the crack I needed. I requested a printed copy of the dissolution documents and left with a folder full of gold. Karen wasn't running a homeowners association. She was running a fantasy, and a fraudulent one, but the rot went deeper. I called a friend of mine from college, Selena Park, now a real estate attorney in Richmond. I asked her to look into the revived HOA paperwork Karen had been handing out. Within 3 hours, she sent me a series of PDFs with red highlights and a voice message that said, "Jonah, this isn't just sketchy, it's potentially criminal." According to Selena, Karen had been issuing notices on forged letterhead, referencing a defunct covenant, and even collected dues from 3 confused elderly residents under the table. She created a fake EIN for a Brookhaven Neighborhood Improvement Fund? Selena said, "It's not a registered nonprofit, it's a front. Karen wasn't just power hungry, she was embezzling money, manipulating fear, and weaponizing bureaucracy against the people least likely to fight back. I took everything to my mother that afternoon. She sat in her recliner, a shawl draped across her knees, and listened in complete silence. When I finished, she leaned forward, opened her drawer, and pulled out an old binder. "Jonah," she said, voice like granite, "it's time you knew what I used to be." Inside the binder were the original documents from the real HOA, charters, bylaws, meeting notes with her signature, pictures of her shaking hands with city council members in the late 80s, and newspaper clippings with headlines like "Brookhaven Neighborhood Association celebrates new sidewalks." She had built the HOA to serve people, to protect children, to advocate for property repairs, neighborly respect, and fairness. But it started to turn, she whispered. They didn't want community, they wanted control. The board turned into bullies. So I led the vote to end it. That vote had been 34-7, and the dissolution had passed, unanimously on the second attempt after a public outcry. "I thought it was dead," she said, "but I guess some ghosts linger." I stared down at her notes. The handwriting, even in her 70s, was precise. Her record-keeping was meticulous. I realized that I wasn't fighting this battle for her. I was fighting it with her. The next step was to find out how Karen got her hands on old records. I started knocking on doors. Some neighbors were scared to talk. Others were just confused. One elderly man said he signed a petition Karen brought by because he thought it was for new speed bumps. A middle-aged woman told me Karen had said she had municipal clearance to enforce old covenants. A third told me something that made my skin crawl. She said your mom had given up her authority and that she was restoring order after decades of decline. That word decline wasn't just about lawn care or loose shutters. It was code. Karen wanted to purify Brookhaven. She was targeting homes with ramps, kids' toys in the yards, multicultural decorations, flags, even solar panels. Anything outside her 1950s fantasy of order. That night, I created a Facebook group, Brookhaven Voices the Truth About the Fake HOA. Within 24 hours, 60 residents joined, then 90, then 150. They started sharing stories, letters, false fines, ramps sabotaged, lights broken. One woman wrote, Karen said my wind chimes were unapproved noise fixtures and threatened a $300 fine. I thought I was going crazy. Another shared, she told me I had to repaint my front door or I'd be reported to the county beautification board. There's no such board. I uploaded the HOA dissolution documents. Selena shared a legal explainer. My mom posted a scanned image of the original charter with her name, signature, and title founder and first president. Brookhaven exploded. The next confrontation wasn't planned. It was a Tuesday. Lily had just come back from physical therapy. I was helping her up the ramp, newly reinforced with steel brackets. Thank you very much when we heard shouting. Karen was at the corner house berating a Korean couple about their mailbox color. Their 10-year-old son was crying. That was it. I walked across the street, clipboard in hand, heart pounding. As I approached, Karen turned like a rattlesnake. You have no business interfering. Mr. Bright, this is official HOA enforcement. I held up the dissolution letter, laminated now. You mean fake HOA enforcement? I said, loud enough for the gathered crowd to hear. Neighbors leaned out their doors. Phones came out. Someone hit record. Karen's face froze. I don't know what you think you're doing. This HOA was legally dissolved in 2005, I said, projecting. You're operating under a false identity, issuing fines without legal standing, and intimidating families with made-up rules. Do you even have any legal credentials, she hissed. I smiled. No, but she does. My mother stepped out onto the porch behind me, holding a framed proclamation from the city honoring her decades of civic leadership. Karen's expression cracked. You're done, I said. She tried to grab my clipboard. Big mistake. 3 people caught it on camera. Another neighbor, a former sheriff's deputy, stepped between us. That's assault. Ma'am. Karen turned pale. For the first time since this started, she backed away. She said nothing. But her silence wasn't surrender. It was the storm before collapse. That night, I filed a formal complaint with the county DA's office. Selena helped submit a fraud report to the Virginia State Corporation Commission. We forwarded the video to a local news station under the subject line, Fake HOA Leader Caught Threatening Elderly Residents and Disabled Child's Family. By morning, it was trending. The phone rang off the hook. My inbox was full. Reporters, lawyers, activists, even a city councilwoman I hadn't seen since my dad's funeral. But the most important message came from an old friend of my mom's. Her name was Clara Marchand, and she'd been the vice president of the original HOA. I think it's time we get the band back together, she said. But I thought the HOA was gone. I replied. Clara laughed. The fake one is, but there's nothing stopping us from creating a real one again. One that serves, not rules. My mother, listening on speaker, nodded once. Then let's build something better. The day after the confrontation, Karen vanished. No morning walks, no clipboards, no flyers taped to mailboxes. Her car, a pristine white Lexus with HOA vanity plates, sat untouched in the driveway. But just because Karen disappeared didn't mean her damage disappeared with her. My phone buzzed nonstop. Parents, veterans, seniors, dozens of people who had been too scared or too confused to speak before. The pattern was undeniable. Karen had been slowly surgically tightening a grip on the neighborhood through forged authority and emotional manipulation. But why? What was she really after? That answer came in the form of a tip from a neighbor named Mason Lynn. He was quiet, polite, and worked as a junior accountant for the county. He messaged me privately. "You need to check out parcel 6843 on the west edge of the neighborhood. Karen filed for zoning reclassification." Quietly. "She wants to build—" I blinked. Parcel 6843 was a grassy field behind the older section of Brookhaven, what locals called the Founder's Loop, where my mother and her neighbors had built their homes in the early 90s. A peaceful, wide greenbelt that included walking trails, community benches, and 3 large oak trees protected under county ordinance. Karen wanted to build on that. I asked Mason to send over the documents. He did, and what I saw made my stomach churn. She'd submitted plans to rezone the area for luxury microtownhomes. Her name was listed as co-investor in the LLC. The signatures for community support were digitally typed, not signed. And the most shocking part, the property had once belonged to the original HOA trust. And when the HOA dissolved, it reverted to the city with stipulations that it remain undeveloped public use land unless a majority of Brookhaven homeowners voted otherwise. No vote had ever occurred. Karen had filed anyway and pushed the reclassification through with forged HOA consent. Now it made sense. The fines, the threats, the control. Karen hadn't just wanted power, she needed the neighborhood to believe in the illusion of her authority, because that illusion gave her leverage to sell off a piece of communal land for private profit. I rushed to Mom's house. She was trimming lavender by the front steps when I pulled up. "Mom," I said breathlessly. She tried to sell the greenbelt. Margaret didn't flinch. She calmly took off her gloves, wiped her hands, and said, "Then it's time we expose her." She opened her old filing cabinet and pulled out the original community deed, signed in 1990 and stamped with the county seal. It clearly outlined that the greenbelt was to be preserved in perpetuity as a recreational and civic space unless dissolved by public referendum. "Let me guess," Mom said. "No referendum." I shook my head. "Only her lies." We launched Phase 2 that night. With Selena's help, I created a formal public complaint filing titled "Fraudulent HOA Authority and Attempted Land Misappropriation in Brookhaven Estates." We attached the forged zoning forms, Karen's LLC registration as co-investor, the original HOA dissolution decree, the original greenbelt deed, witness statements from 10 residents, a notarized letter from Margaret Bright as founder of the original HOA. We sent copies to the county commissioner's office, the planning and zoning board, the attorney general's consumer protection unit, and 3 local news outlets. But we didn't stop there. We organized a Brookhaven town hall, open to all residents. The flyer read, "Who owns our neighborhood? You deserve to know the truth about the fake HOA, the greenbelt sale, and who's profiting Wednesday, 6 p.m., Community Pavilion, open mic. Bring your voice." The response explosive. More than 120 residents showed up, young families, veterans, retirees, teachers, nurses. People were angry, confused, ashamed they'd been duped. Margaret stepped onto the small stage with quiet grace. She spoke slowly, clearly. "I helped build this neighborhood 30 years ago," she said. "Not for profit, but for people. And I will not stand by while someone rewrites its soul." The applause was thunderous. Then I took the mic. I walked the crowd through the fraud, the fake HOA, the ramp attack, the zoning theft. I showed documents on a projector. I let neighbors speak. Tears were shed. Yells echoed through the night air. Then someone asked, "Where's Karen now?" I answered honestly. "Hiding?" The very next morning, the news broke. Channel 7. News aired a 6-minute expose titled "Fake HOA President Accused of Land Fraud and Disabled Ramp Sabotage." Karen's face filled the screen, grainy footage of her yelling at the Korean family, freeze-framed under the headline. The footage of her trying to snatch my clipboard aired. So did a clip of Lily's broken ramp, with a voiceover from my mom saying she hurt my granddaughter. That's where this stopped being about rules and started being about right and wrong. By noon, Karen's office shed was being dismantled by the city. The county zoning board issued an emergency suspension of the land reclassification. Her LLC co-investor, a shady builder named Dean Latchford, issued a one-line statement, Ms. Thistlewood acted independently. We are withdrawing. Karen herself refused all comment, but it was too late. The walls were closing in. 3 days later, she tried to hold a secret emergency HOA meeting at her house. Only 5 people showed up, and 2 of them were undercover reporters. One of them, a podcast host named Alyssa Green, published a full 45-minute breakdown of the fake HOA scheme titled Queen Karen of Brookhaven Power, Paranoia, and a Ramp to Nowhere. It trended nationwide. And for the first time in weeks, I laughed. Then came the official letter. The Virginia Attorney General's office notified us that a formal investigation into fraudulent municipal representation, misuse of community assets, and personal endangerment was underway. Karen was served at her home publicly with neighbors watching and phones recording. She slammed the door in the officer's face, but the documents were left anyway. Subpoenas, depositions, freezing of assets. It had begun. But the true victory wasn't the legal documents or the media firestorm. It came 1 week later, on a breezy Sunday morning. Lily was walking up the new ramp, sturdy, steel reinforced, beautifully painted in teal, when Margaret stepped out with a cup of cocoa and said, "You know, I think it's time we do this right." I smiled. "Start over." "Not just that," she said. "Rebuild. The real HOA. One that protects people instead of punishing them. One that reflects who we are now, not who we were in 1990. I nodded. "But you're not running it alone." She looked at me sideways. "No. I was thinking you might take the gavel this time." And that's when I realized the past had built the neighborhood, but the future was ours to shape. Karen didn't go down quietly. For someone who had spent months barking orders from a clipboard and smirking through intimidation, she turned into a ghost remarkably fast once the subpoenas hit her doorstep. But her silence wasn't a retreat, it was strategy. She was stalling, plotting, trying to outlast the outrage. But what Karen didn't understand, what so many tyrants fail to realize, is that once people taste the truth, they can't unsee the lie. The investigation moved quickly. Within days, the Attorney General's Consumer Fraud Division requested interviews with over a dozen residents. I was among the first. So was Mom, and so was the Korean family she'd harassed, who brought with them video recordings and the broken mailbox Karen had ordered, replaced, and tried to bill them for. Selena helped us organize our paperwork. Clara Marchand, my mother's old friend and former HOA vice president, brought out scanned archives from the original HOA structure to show how Karen had replicated its identity almost word for word right down to the bylaws, only edited with new compliance fines. Then, the most damning blow hit. A whistleblower came forward. His name was Travis Burke, a former handyman Karen had hired to inspect homes. In a sworn statement, he admitted that Karen had instructed him to photograph any homes with visible nonconformities, measure yard encroachments without permission, remove screws from the base of Margaret Bright's wheelchair ramp under the cover of night. That last one sent a chill down my spine. She said it was temporary. Travis told investigators, just to scare her into complying. I didn't know it had hurt a kid. When that confession aired on Channel 7 paired with video footage of Lily's fall, the public response was nuclear. Karen's name became poison. Her white Lexus was keyed and egged. A crowd gathered at her gate one evening, holding signs that read, "This is not a dictatorship, and you messed with the wrong grandma." Someone planted a giant inflatable ramp in her front yard, duct taped with a sign, "Build this, not your lies." We didn't condone the harassment, but we understood the anger. The story went national, morning shows, talk radio, social media. Hashtags trended for days. Fake hoe fraud, Rikshad ramp justice, Karen crumble. But Karen still didn't speak. She didn't apologize. She didn't retract. She didn't resign. So we kept going. The city responded next. At our request and under growing pressure from residents and press, the City Council held a special session to review the misuse of the Greenbelt application. Margaret and I attended, along with dozens of neighbors. Councilwoman Rosario, a fierce Latina who'd grown up near Brookhaven, took the floor and thundered. This was not an HOA mistake. It was a personal deception. This was not a miscommunication. It was an abuse of trust, cloaked in false authority. And the people of Brookhaven deserve restitution. A motion was passed unanimously, revoke all zoning requests filed under the fake HOA. Restore legal notice to all affected homeowners that the new HOA has no authority. Declare the Greenbelt a protected space, permanently shielded from development. Karen was stripped of any illusion of control, but justice wasn't finished. 2 weeks later, she was arrested, early morning, calm skies. Flashing red and blue at the edge of the cul-de-sac, Karen stepped onto her porch in a silk robe, hair still perfectly curled, as if preparing for a press conference instead of handcuffs. The officer read her rights. She didn't resist. The charges impersonating a municipal authority, forgery of official documents, endangerment of a disabled minor, attempted misappropriation of public land for private gain. Her mugshot was somber and scornful. In court, her attorney tried to spin it as misunderstood ambition. But the judge, a steely woman in her 60s, shut that down. This is not a matter of ambition. This is a case of a citizen exploiting the vulnerable for personal advancement, and the court will treat it accordingly. Karen was denied bail pending trial. We expected months of legal drama, but instead, a plea deal came faster than anyone predicted. Faced with over 30 signed complaints, video evidence, Travis's statement, and county records, Karen cracked. Her lawyer arranged a deal: 5 years probation, 18 months house arrest, full restitution to all victims, public apology submitted in writing and posted to the city's legal notice board, community service 500 hours including accessibility training. To some, it felt light. To others, it was enough. But to my family, it was closure. The ramp was rebuilt, not just at Mom's house, but across the neighborhood. Our new community association note, not an HOA, a council, with no enforcement power, created a volunteer task force, Brookhaven Betterment. We offered to help seniors upgrade access, repaint fences, trim hedges, whatever they needed. No fines, no threats, just help. My mom was elected honorary chair. Lily was given the ceremonial title of youth advocate. And at the spring picnic, she gave a speech that made grown adults cry. When I fell, I thought I wasn't supposed to be here. But now I know that people like me, ramps and all, belong, and we always will. Thunderous applause. Even Clara Marchand wiped her eyes. A month after Karen's sentencing, I stood on the sidewalk as a mural was painted on the side of the community shed, once her HOA headquarters. Now, it was a tool-sharing hub, a pantry drop-off spot, and a bulletin board for free tutoring and book swaps. The mural showed Margaret, young and proud in her 90s denim jacket, helping a child onto a ramp. The child had Lily's curls. Underneath it read, "Access is freedom, community is power." I stood next to my mom as the final brushstroke went on. She didn't say much, just squeezed my hand. We didn't need to say anything. We had reclaimed our home and rewritten its story. You could almost miss it if you were just passing through Brookhaven Estates, nestled between two highways, shaded by oaks, just another name on a GPS map. But if you stood in the cul-de-sac and listened closely now, you'd hear something different than before. Not Karen's voice, not fear, not silence. Laughter, conversations, sawing and hammering from a community project, kids riding scooters, the whistle of wind through our new wind chimes, the same kind Karen once tried to ban. Brookhaven had changed, and this time, it was for good. It didn't happen overnight. Karen's shadow still lingered, in overgrown citations that no one had dared remove from their windows, in whispered apologies between neighbors who'd once report each other out of fear, and in the creaking memory of a ramp that nearly killed a child. But change came slow and steady through action. We renamed the Greenbelt, Margaret's Crossing, a nod to my mother, to her fight, to what she built, to what she rebuilt. A new wooden arch stood at the trail's entrance. Clara designed it. I carved the dedication plaque by hand. Beneath it, a quote from Mom's favorite civic speech. The power of community is not in its rules, but in its willingness to rise. We dismantled the HOA shed, not out of spite, but transformation. In its place stood a community commons, part workshop, part pantry, part learning hub. The kids painted a mural inside. Lily led the project. It showed ramps being built, trees being planted, diverse families walking hand in hand. It was messy, bright, beautiful, exactly like Brookhaven now. The Commons offered free tools, Wi-Fi for students, and a weekly Fix-It Friday where retired mechanics, carpenters, and nurses donated time to help others. One woman, Miss June, who'd once been fined $75 for her non-regulation tomato planters, now taught urban gardening every Saturday. Her tomatoes still thriving, but the real magic wasn't in buildings. It was in hearts. At first, when people were tentative, unsure, neighbors kept their heads down, but over time, they began waving again, helping each other carry groceries, watching each other's kids, dropping off cookies, asking questions, listening. It was Lily who said it best one night over dinner. It's like the neighborhood remembered how to care. Even my mother, who had once quietly faded into her armchair with a blanket and tea, now walked to the Greenbelt every morning, cane in hand, to check in on progress and say hello to anyone who passed. Karen. We rarely spoke of her. Her house was quiet. Her Lexus was gone. Sometimes I'd see her silhouette in the window during community events, but she never came out. The restitution checks came on, timed small payments, court-ordered and automated. Eventually, we stopped waiting for remorse. We had bigger things to build. We held our first Brookhaven Gathering Day that fall. Not a fundraiser, not a voting event, just people, together. We grilled. We danced. The kids played tug-of-war on Margaret's Crossing. Someone brought a projector and played the Iron Giant on a makeshift screen of bedsheets. Even Lily's physical therapist came and cried, watching her run with the other kids. I gave a small speech. Nothing fancy. I just said community doesn't start with fences. It starts with open hands. Mom received a standing ovation when she spoke. She wore a simple floral blouse, her silver hair in a loose bun. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. We're not perfect, she said. We never were, but we care, and that's enough. That winter, something unexpected happened. We were nominated for a State Civic Renewal Award, a recognition for neighborhoods that overcame conflict to rebuild ethically and inclusively. A state rep came by, interviewed residents, filmed the murals, talked to Lily, read the documents. They even included the original HOA scandal as part of the nomination, citing radical transparency and resilience in the face of neighborhood corruption. We didn't win first place, but we were featured in a documentary series, and honestly, that felt better, because people outside our town saw what we had done, not just what had happened to us. It's been over a year now. Karen is no longer under house arrest, but she hasn't returned to public life. Last I heard, she moved in with a sister 3 counties over. No new HOA in sight, but her legacy doesn't haunt us anymore, because we reclaimed it, repurposed it, rewrote it. My mother's old binder, the one with the original HOA documents, it's now in a glass case at the front of the community commons next to Lily's walker, the one she used the day she fell. They sit side by side as reminders, what was built, what was broken, and what we chose to build back better. I still teach history, but now, when my students ask for a real example of civic change, I don't have to look far. I just tell them once upon a time, a woman tried to tear down a ramp, but she accidentally rebuilt a community. The end.